Hello, everyone. So, today, as promised and as scheduled, is our dopamine breakfast live stream dedicated to our high performance favorite molecule, dopamine. These days I hear from so many people on my social media and just in life in general when we start talking about performance, about ADHD. Like people either self diagnosed or diagnosed. And the basic kind of problem is people have really hard times focusing on one thing, doing the work, feeling up for it, feeling this laser focused energy and motivation and get done kind of state. And it really interferes with people's work and productivity. Like imagine if every time you have to focus, you need to get yourself ready for 20, 30 minutes, and then you work for 15 minutes, and then you have to either have some coffee or do something else to get yourself back to work. Like how much potential and productivity is lost there. And what I'm learning from people and experts is most of that ADHD is self-induced, meaning you just don't do the things that a human being has to do to produce on a regular basis sufficient amount of dopamine. Our brain is designed in a way that it requires certain things for us to do, to eat, to see. So our brain produces optimal amount of dopamine that is needed for optimal performance every single day. Basically, so when you need to get work done, you have the resources in your brain to get it done. And a lot of it, folks, has to do with nutrition. Like dopamine, it's an actual molecule. It's not some, again, metaphysical concept out there or something made out of thin air. It's actually made out of food stuff, like building blocks, just like anything else in our body. It's made of actual stuff that we consume or is produced in other ways in our body. So dopamine, what is it made of? Well, the major building block of dopamine, the limiting factor of building your dopamine, is actually something that has, I think, kind of controversial situation. People think you need to eat less of it to live longer, or maybe somebody thinks that you get a kidney disease or something. But for majority of you, that all doesn't matter, and it's special cases and not applicable to most of the people's lives. What's applicable to most of the people's lives and your performance and your productivity and your focus every day is that if you don't eat enough protein with this specific amino acid, tyrosine, then guess what's going to happen? Your dopamine molecule is actually built out of that tyrosine. And if you don't eat it regularly or in insufficient amounts, or your body has to kind of like save it for other things like putting in your muscles and whatnot, then your brain is not going to be getting enough, and you're going to be having harder times focusing and getting work done and having energy and motivation. So a little bit of my story. I thought that it wasn't that important to eat that protein before my work. But in the morning, I would have harder times putting my thoughts in one cohering stream, right? It's kind of like was all over the place. And I would have harder times making myself sit down and get to work on hard stuff until I started having protein for breakfast. And for me, that and a little bit of carbohydrates saved the whole problem. I eat it and I can get to work right away. I don't need any stimulants. What I also noticed is that I personally require much less caffeine, almost none, to get myself started in the morning really fast when I eat protein, especially protein for breakfast. Now, when we're talking about protein for dopamine, you need to eat sufficient amount and the right kind. We need specific amino acid tyrosine that is predominantly found and more available in animal-based sources, especially things like chicken and turkey and salmon, beef and pork, and then we have eggs and dairy products, and then less so in tofu and in all the other plant-based sources, really not sufficient amount. And the recommended amount for breakfast of that protein to have is about 30 grams. Now you can get a big cup of my favorite, actually, Greek yogurt, plain Greek yogurt. You can also get a piece of salmon or some eggs. If eggs, you probably need to have quite a lot, I don't know, 4 and more. Beef, pork, whatever is your favorite, chicken, turkey. If you go for plant-based, then a lot of tofu. Or that a lot of my clients find very useful, I call it quickie. You just have a protein shake and the second ingredient with that I'm going to be talking about in a minute. And that's how you get your protein. Again, if you're not a breakfast person, get your protein shake, and at least you're going to give the major building block of dopamine to your brain, so your brain is not limited and not having hard times building those molecules to make you focus. Stop shooting yourself in the food and thinking that science doesn't work. If you're interested in being productive in the morning, as productive as you can be, if you're not a breakfast person, run a test, get that protein and see how you do. Evaluate how you usually do, how much time it's going to get you. It gets you to get started, to get focused, and to stay focused for a long time. And then eat that protein, 30 grams plus. Google, how much protein is in, I don't know, fish, chicken, or whatever it is you like to eat, or get your protein shake, right? So run the experiment and see how you do. So number one, if there is one thing you want to remember from this life, how to feed your dopamine, your focus, your motivation, your get shit done molecule, is eat your protein for breakfast. You're going to see the effect usually in 20, 30 minutes. Now, the second thing that I find to be super important for most people out there is to eat long-lasting fibrous carbohydrates with that protein. Those carbohydrates your brain will use to create that glucose fuel that your brain absolutely loves and in most cases needs to perform optimally. They did a lot of research and experiments showing that when the brain gets its glucose, it works better on a lot of cognitive and physical tasks. So fibrous carbohydrates. What do we mean by fibrous carbohydrates? Carbohydrates that come in the form of whole food. Think your oatmeal, or I love bananas, or whatever your, food grade carbohydrate favorite is, then eat that. I recommend the ones with more fiber. Beans, if you love eating beans for breakfast, I love eating beans for breakfast. That's going to be the best because they have the most fiber per serving. And what it means is that carbohydrate energy, that blood glucose will last much longer, and the energy release will be much steadier, right? There is much less chance that your blood sugar ever gonna spike in any direction with that amount of fiber. So for that quickie breakfast that I mentioned above, the protein shake, I would usually recommend to my clients, get those 2 bananas wherever you are, and you have your additional vitamins to create that dopamine B6. You're going to get your protein with that protein shake. You're going to get those carbohydrates, and it's a much freaking better solution than coffee with some pastry, some questionable pastry, right? So those 2 things, your protein, the sufficient amount, the right kind, and the fibrous carbohydrates, get it for your brain, especially protein that your dopamine is made of. Now, your dopamine needs other molecules to keep you focused, to help it out. Things like adrenaline in the brain that requires vitamin C. That's why I personally eat guavas for breakfast. You might be eating oranges, but chew it. Don't drinking, so you don't cause your blood sugar to spike and then crash. So vitamin C source, bananas already have some, this B6 vitamin that is also needed for dopamine. I also recommend to get a handful of walnuts for those omega-3s that your brain uses to build connections between neurons and to reduce inflammation. I also like a square of dark chocolate for breakfast. That increases blood circulation towards your brain. That makes everything better. Everything that your brain does with more blood circulating there, everything happens better. So my favorite, actually, I like to have a big cup of Greek yogurt, some frozen for extra liquid raspberries or blueberries, another brainy food, a handful of walnuts, guava for vitamin C, and a piece of dark chocolate. And that gets me going. It keeps me going for hours. And again, I personally definitely notice, even though I never had any ADHD problems, but I notice how better and longer my brain works. And again, if you're not a believer in nutrition science, just try it out and see how you do. And again, the shortcuts that I use with a lot of my clients is this quick breakfast, or what I like to call quickie. And it's protein shake with 30 grams plus of protein and a couple of bananas. And if you have a handful of walnuts, also throw them in there. And I think that's about it, folks. Remember, again, if there's only one thing you got to take away from today's episode, get your protein for breakfast. And if you are struggling with focus and ADHD throughout your day, get your protein. I actually recommend it to everyone for lunch and dinner as well, 30 grams plus. And the kind and amount really matters. And that's it for today, folks. Now you understand much better the brain nutrition, nutritional psychiatry. These are emerging fields, and a lot more research is coming out telling us about the connection between the gut and our brain, how different nutrients change our mental and emotional and performance states. So stay tuned. What else, folks? Tomorrow, we're going to have another live 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific time. And we're going to be talking about things that most of you, from my experience, are doing throughout your day that are stealing your brain energy, causing premature fatigue, exhaustion, and burnout. There are better ways to use your brain. You just never been given the user manual. And tomorrow, I'm going to give you a part of it. So 12 p.m. tomorrow Eastern, another live stream. Stay tuned for my post about it, and definitely tune in tomorrow. And that's it, folks. Get your breakfast, get your protein, and I'll talk to you very soon. Until then, have a very productive